All right, I'm gonna head up then. Here we go. What? All right, everybody, we're gonna go ahead and get started. First off, thank you all for being here, especially with this storm coming. I appreciate you being here in person. I would thank everybody watching on YouTube, but that's not working. But thank you all for joining us for the very first GNVisionaries Casual Keynote. Woo! Of course, I got to thank Acel. So thank you, everybody on the Acel team, for your support, and thank you for Alchemy Work Club for hosting. Andy did want to say a few words. I don't see him, so we'll go ahead and let him speak at the end. Also, thank you for everybody for getting the word out. I think the hurricane might have had something to do with the limited attendance, but that's okay. We want everybody to be prepared, so no worries there. Yeah, how about just one more quick round of applause for everybody. Cool. All right, so that's it. That's my speech. Have a good night. Just kidding. It's not that casual of a keynote. So these keynote series, while casual, really are meant to be an opportunity to obtain the very best in professional development advice from emerging leaders within the community, hence our partnership with Acel. And I'm very excited to be kicking things off by speaking to my own life experiences and describing how I gained a modicum of clarity for my life, for the vision of my life. All right, so when I was 10, I wanted to be Andre Agassi, until I learned that headbands will make you go bald. Then I realized that I could cut holes in the headband, pull it over my eyes, and become a Ninja Turtle. I'd still be bald, but, you know, worth it, right? My aspirations continued to shift, often vacillating between practical and idealistic, analytical and creative, burly and genteel. And by late 2001, in the post 9/11 era, Fox News basically convinced me that I wasn't manly enough and that the military would fix me. It was at my 10-year mark as a Russian cryptologic linguist in the Air Force that I had a crisis of conscience and I became a devout pacifist, hence the t-shirt. So once again, I went from one extreme to another, but this time, I know that I found the right path because nearly 8 years since separating from the Air Force, I know that I formed it on my own, the path that I'm currently on, not giving in to any sort of pressure from the outside world around me. So suffice it to say, I've learned a decent amount about what should and shouldn't go into everyone's life path, or into envisioning one's life path, personally and professionally. So in my capacity as professional development chair for Acel, I knew any program I came up with had to have vision forming as the first and foremost pillar. The importance of vision forming is obvious when you're forming any sort of path. So we don't need to focus on why visions are important, but we should look into how visions are formed effectively, because that's not so obvious. So visions are often associated with sight, but having a vision isn't about seeing exactly which path is going to lead to an envisioned destination. I personally think we can never really know exactly where we're headed. Having vision is more about sensing which paths won't lead to a number of any preferred destinations. It's like walking in a pitch black room with your hands out. If there's no wall in front of you, you're on the right path. So ideally, so that we can not take too many wrong turns and not bump into too many walls, we'd have our parents to provide us with a solid foundation on which to navigate this black hallway that we're in. But by that same token, though, ideally, we would actually accept the advice that our parents provide us. To let our parents and ourselves off the hook for just a minute, you can have a solid foundation on life and still fail at forming a vision if you don't understand what's involved with finding your boundaries and feeling out your walls. Sensing those walls isn't as easy as just putting out your hands, though. It requires your intuition, your sixth sense, your gut, whatever you want to call it, which is honed through years of intra and extrapersonal analysis at all levels within yourself, within your families, communities, and beyond. So by now, you can probably tell that this is going to be unlike any discussion on vision forming that you've ever heard before, because I've got you in a black room, pitch black room, looking for walls rather than trying to climb over them and get to a mountaintop. That's because establishing a clear vision for our lives, walking comfortably in the dark, really boils down to answering two common questions in an uncommon way. What do I have and what do I need? Most people will reach way back into their past and try to figure out what they have, and way into the future and figure out what they need, while simultaneously ignoring the present, which is the only place you will ever exist. So before we go any further, let's backtrack for a minute. To demonstrate why it's so difficult to get that solid foundation, I'd like to tell you about the oldest debate in history. So you probably recognize this painting. It is The School of Athens by Raphael, but you didn't know it was a Ninja Turtle. Did you know, though, that the poses of the two central figures, Plato and Aristotle, represent a debate that has been raging since the 6th century BC? I believe that the inconclusiveness of that debate... Who's calling me?
Splinter.
The inconclusiveness of that debate is largely why we are in the dark. I'll explain. You see, Plato believed in what he called forms, or perfect, timeless essences in existence that actually existed apart from us, and anything here on earth was just a poor reflection of those forms. To Plato, deep down, we all collectively know what goodness and beauty are, which are two of the most important virtues in ancient Greece, because we are parts of that whole. This is why Plato is pointing to the sky with a single finger. Aristotle, in stark contrast, believed that the whole is part of us. Or, in other words, we all collectively learn what goodness and beauty are only after innumerable instances, what Aristotle called instances, wherein we determine or deem something in life to be good and or beautiful. So to Aristotle, we exist as sketches on tracing paper that only reveal a complete image when stacked. This is why Aristotle's hand is extending outward to all of us with his fingers pointing directly at us. So how does this debate affect our processes for forming visions? Well, let's look at a historically popular concept within the context of that debate and see what happens. What is destiny? How would these gentlemen define it? Well, if you're Plato, you'd probably say destiny is a single force pulling you, or us, toward some perfect end. But if you're Aristotle, you'd probably say that it's a vast multitude of forces pushing you toward a likely end. You might say that Aristotle is focused on the past and answering the question, what do we have? Our genetics, our cultures, our personal experiences all compound day by day, making us who we are to a great extent. On the other hand, Plato might say that it would be focused on the future and answering the question, what do I need? Our family obligations, our social norms, and our personal goals all contribute to what we term our actualized selves, which exist somewhere out there. In terms of the pitch black hallway analogy, all of these forces are other hands prodding and yanking us through the blackness, not necessarily in our preferred direction. Oftentimes those forces are going to push you right into a wall because they don't realize where your walls are, nor do they even care. It is up to us, ultimately, to figure out where our walls are and overcome those forces in order to stop hitting them, or at least avoid hitting them over and over again. Because remember, we can have a solid foundation or perspective on the world and still be at the mercy of these forces if we don't also have a solid perspective on ourselves. And this happens more often than not because we have a very firm perspective on who we think we are, but just in terms of superficialities, which can't stand up to these outside forces pushing and pulling us through this dark hallway. So as an example, you may have said before, everything happens for a reason. I've said it, but I got to the point where I started asking myself, am I saying that from an Aristotelian perspective, like everything leading up to this moment could be traced backwards with some savvy detective work? Or am I saying that from a Platonic perspective, as in every moment is being masterminded by some force that I don't understand towards some perfect result? Most of the time, that phrase is being said for neither reason. That phrase is what's known as a thought-stopping phrase. We say it in order to not think about the situation anymore. But before we've actually done the due diligence to figure out how this affects us and how it impacts who we are. So I would challenge everybody, this wouldn't be much of a keynote if I didn't, to replace that phrase with, I need to investigate how this affects who I am. And I could easily turn this into an hour-long keynote if I started talking about how I believe that who we are really comes down to how we answer a finite set of philosophical questions, including that debate. Which ultimately results in our life principles, which is at the core of our identities. Personally, when it comes to that debate, I do have a stance. While I may lean more towards Aristotle, at the end of the day, ultimately, that debate does not matter. Neither theory has ever told me how to live my life in the present. Neither Plato nor Aristotle can ever help me figure out how to be a Ninja Turtle. I kid, but seriously, for the longest time, I was caught in the middle of this debate, trying to answer the questions, what do I have and what do I need, in a way that seemingly resolved one another. Saying, I want what I don't have in the future, and I need what I never got as a child. Thereby becoming a rope in an endless tug-of-war. It wasn't until I began answering those questions based on my principles daily, never removing my hands from my walls, that I began to sense where my path is headed, if only because I know where it's not headed. So here's the bottom line. The clarity of our visions for the future will forever be equal to the strength of your identity in the present. On the day-to-day level, that debate between Plato and Aristotle, the past and the future, your traumas, your actualized selves, those are all distractions to your present. When we answer the questions, what do I have and what do I need, the answers should reveal our horizons, but we shouldn't see them off in the distance. We should feel them right where we are. So I know this isn't the most romantic take on vision forming, speaking from experience. I can tell you that it is the least taxing, at least. So I don't need to know where I'm headed, for instance. I just need to know where I am. And right now, in this moment, as in many moments ahead of me, as far as I can tell, and from the foreseeable future, I'm somebody who sees himself as being someone who wants to promote personal growth, mentor leadership, and community building. In short, a GNVisionary. It can't get any clearer than that. That's it. Thank you.